I think that now, yes, we have finally Jacques connected.
Yes.
Hello, Jacques. Okay, Jacques, now we can hear you. Thank you very much for joining us. I have already introduced you before, so I think you can now start with your speech, and feel free to start when you want, okay?
Thank you very much for inviting me. And given what this issue is, I have to say a few heavy words. First is that the first human rights and the real first human rights are the right to eat, to have enough to eat, the right to have benefit from care, and the right also to have a home. These things, the Afghan people is deprived. After 20 years of presence of the Western powers in Afghanistan, France left in 2013, but has been there, has been involved in what happened. None of this is benefiting. Sorry, there are problems in the connection.
Okay, we can hear you now, go on.
If you hear me, yes. So that's the first thing to say. The basic human rights of which the Afghan people have been deprived, even women, nothing has changed except in the big cities, and a few 4 or 5 big cities. In the rest of Afghanistan, the situation during the presence of the Western powers has been the same. So when they say human rights, women, this has not been given to women in the population, except in the big cities. Then we have now a situation where about 70 billion persons, 42% of the population, are suffering from hunger or malnutrition and in desperate situation. Also, there was a collapse of the Afghan currency, given the fact that the Western powers have decided to block all investments abroad of Afghanistan. There are reserves of about 9.5 billion, which have been blocked in the West, especially by the American Treasury. So then you have a country or countries, United States and the Western powers, that have occupied Afghanistan, and after having created everything that I stressed before, now are preventing Afghanistan to give its money back, to have its money back. So in that sense, it's not only a question of an occupation, a physical occupation by armed forces before, but it's now a financial or neo-colonial occupation. So that's the reality of the situation in Afghanistan. You can say many things besides that, but these are, I think, the main facts. So the big challenge is to transform Afghanistan from a pivot of geopolitical games into a springboard of a new era of cooperation. So that's the challenge for all of us. Afghanistan belongs as be part of the international IRB, then has joined the Asian Bank for Investment in Infrastructure, and also is member of the Organization of Cooperation of Shanghai Organization of Cooperation. So Afghanistan is involved already with countries from the East into diverse agreements. From the West, nothing has been yet organized except let it do rightly type of money given to the Afghans in about a few hundred billions, which has a few hundred millions, which has very little compared to the 9.5 billion, which has been freezed from them, their money. So that's the situation overall in Afghanistan. It has been seen from that standpoint. We see it from that standpoint. What are we going to do despite the problem with the Taliban and what the Taliban represent? What are we going to do for the Afghani people, for the population? And that's a big challenge that has to be considered. So if we want to develop Afghanistan, what is needed is infrastructure. No infrastructure was practically built during the last 20 years, except some roads who have been built, but now they're collapsing, and also a railway between Mazar el-Sharif and Tajikistan, 70 kilometers only. So Afghanistan has no infrastructure and depends fully on foreign aids. So if the foreign aid is cut and if they have no access to their own monetary reserves, it means that the winter is going to be a winter of hunger and destruction. So we have to do something, and it is extremely urgent from us to take care of the consequences of what we have done as Western powers. So there is the first thing to do in infrastructure is to have, to develop the 5 nations railway: China, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and also Iran, from Iran to Herat, and then from Herat to Kabul. So there are a number of railways reaching the borders of Afghanistan, but inside Afghanistan, there is practically nothing except this Mazar el-Sharif, Tajikistan network. So we have to create railway. So you have to create the networks for the equipment and development of Afghanistan and to connect Afghanistan inside and with outside economies. What happened with last 20 years is, in fact, that what the United States said is that they want to create for Afghanistan democracy and a system of the type that we know in our Western powers. In fact, what happened is that to achieve that, they have allied with the landlords from the very valleys of Afghanistan and giving money to them and giving the possibility for them to be involved in the production of poppy and heroin traffic. So this has happened. The Taliban, this is known, and I've said it before, but our friend Pino Arlaki, who was in charge of that for the United Nations, for the drug policy for the United Nations, confirmed it between 1997 and 2001, when the Taliban were in power. They cut the poppy production. It's after that it developed under the presence of the Western powers. So we have also to consider that. They have now pledged that they would eradicate the poppy production. Let's take them to the word and see if they do it. But let's give to Afghanistan the conditions to develop and to be equipped by the means which would create what we call in France, désenclavement, which means connections, inclusivity in the country geographical structure. Is, if you want to compare to an European country, Afghanistan is in big, what Switzerland is in little. And Switzerland developed because they were connecting the various valleys and the various regions. This is exactly what we have to do in Afghanistan. Also, we have to consider and to cooperate in the CASA 1000 plan to interconnect the electric networks with of Afghanistan between Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Pakistan. And they need electricity. One of the big points of development is to have electricity. If you don't have electricity, you cannot develop a country. And then we need to also cooperate in TAP 500, which is something else, which is an electrical network, which is another one, connecting Afghanistan to Turkmenistan. And this is very important. Also, TAPI, which means it's a gas pipeline connecting with Turkmenistan gas to Afghanistan. They go until India and they cross via Afghanistan. So this is badly needed also by Afghanistan, who has no proper means to have gas. So they need gas from outside. So if these things are taken together, it creates the conditions for the development of the country. And this is for us a way, and the Chinese have understood it for certain countries of Africa. If you create economic development, you can create the conditions of a, let's say, good togetherness, and at the same time, it will come to democracy. You cannot start by pretending creating democracy when you don't generate economic integrated development. So this is really the challenge, to leave or to get rid of a world involved by, represented by geopolitics, geopolitics being the economic effect of a financial view, which means that the ones who win should take advantage of one who lose. Instead, it should be cooperation and generate mutual development. So this is a big challenge. There have been a number of meetings. Sergei Lavrov said that the United States would be welcome in these meetings. The United States did not come. As for France or for the Western powers, they claim that the rights of Afghanistan, of women, and the rights of free speech and the rights of free writing are not respected in Afghanistan, which is true. But how do you change that? You don't change that by strangling a country. You change that by changing the basis on which things are built in the social context of Afghanistan. So in that sense, a change in Afghanistan should also change our view of the economy at a world level for us. So that's why participation in Afghanistan should create in the world today the possibility of the example for a new system of economic cooperation and development, and not as today a system of financial domination based on speculation, bubbles, and the ruling of the elites of Wall Street and the City of London and all the associates for the world. So Afghanistan, in that sense, as small as it is, could be something that generates a challenge for us all to change in a better way. So if you add to that Yemen, the countries of Western Africa, if you add to that Syria, if you add to that some countries of Ibero-America, if you add all that, it's a change from a regime of enslavement by a financial order and by the debt to a regime of common development. So this is a big challenge, and I think Afghanistan is this challenge for us all. And if you look from that, let's say, from that optimistic or based on hope, if you look at the situation from that standpoint, you can generate a change. If not, if you look at it to punish those that don't respect human rights, you would be first hypocritical, because what have you done during the last 20 years? And second, you can only generate the war of all against all. So the West should give this example of this capacity to connect with Russia, with China, with India, with Pakistan in a common front for the development. And I think this is the only way toward the future, not only in Afghanistan, but at this point of history in the whole world, because we have this shortage of everything at this point in the West, given to an international situation, due to an international situation, and we don't have a common development. So I think this challenge is exemplified by what we can do in Afghanistan, but it's much broader than that. This is what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Jacques. Thank you for your speech.